Hi everyone. I need to share something with you. Today I came to my loom and look what I found. A broken warp thread. Now for so many weavers this is the stuff of nightmares, and it really shouldn't be, because to mend a broken warp is actually a very simple operation. It is a two-step operation, I'll tell you that right at the beginning as we start out. But when you have a broken warp, and we can experience a broken warp for a number of reasons. It could just be that there's a weakness in the yarn. It could be that something has frayed it when it's in the reed. It could be anything that actually causes this, but we don't need to despair when we see this. And I'm going to show you today exactly how to deal with this. So the first thing you're going to need is you'll need a couple of pins. You'll need a warp thread weight of some description. I'm using obviously the Ashford warp thread weight here, and I like these weights because you can adjust the weight on them. So if you're working with a very fine yarn, you use fewer weights. If you're working with a heavier yarn, you would use more weights. And it's very nice to be able to control that. So what are we going to do about this broken warp now? The first thing is that we're going to find the other end of it, which is behind the reed, obviously. This little thread here is worth nothing to us now, so I'm just going to ignore that and leave that on the face of the fabric. I'm going to take a piece of scrap yarn, the same color as the thread that is broken, not particularly long, and I'm going to tie it onto the end that is behind the heddle. Just in an overhand knot, nice and firm. You don't want the knot obviously to come undone. And then I'm going to take my threading hook and I'm going to pull it through the hole where it came from. I'm going to leave a certain amount of slack on the back end of that thread. Now I'm going to just take a pin, and I'm very simply going to put my pin in to my weaving at a point where the one side of the pin is in line with where my broken thread was, and I'm going to anchor that tail around the pin so that it can't move. This little bit, as I said, is actually not going to be of any use to us at all, so it can just stay there and just lie on the face of the fabric. I'm going to just take my warp thread weight. I've got 3 weights on there. We might need to add more, or we might need to take one off. I'm going to just hook it around that loop of thread that I've created by putting in that false piece, and I'm going to suspend it so that it hangs over the back of the loom. What I need to do now is I need to continue with my weaving. And as I weave and as I advance the warp and as my weaving progresses, that little knot is going to come closer and closer and closer to the reed. I'm going to weave until it is sitting right behind the reed, and then I'm going to show you the next part of the operation. As my weaving is progressing here, you can see that that false thread that I've got hanging on the weight is actually well balanced in relation to the rest of the warp. If my warp weights were too heavy, you would see that that thread would be pulling, and you'd get like a tiny little bump in your weaving there where your tension was off. Likewise, if I needed to put another weight on there, so if it wasn't heavy enough to begin with, you would find that that thread which is loose would be forming little bubbles in the warp as you progressed. So the fact that everything is lying very nicely in line there means that my weight that I have on the end of my warp threads is absolutely perfect. Woven a few centimeters, And when I advance my warp now, our little knot is going to come right up to behind the reed. If I move my shuttle out of the way, you can see that that is where I anchored the tail of that false thread that we've put in. So if I now just advance my warp, excuse my arm going across in front of the camera, but there is my little knot sitting right behind the reed. Something else that I want to point out to you here, because it's quite interesting, is that right next to where I've tied on, in the next warp end, in fact, you can see that there's a little slub in the yarn, and it's quite possible that it was like a little spinning defect like that, which possibly caused my break in the first time. These things happen, and there's an industry standard which makes it acceptable up to a certain point. So just be aware that that sort of thing is quite likely to be a weakness in your yarn. So I've woven a few more centimeters and I'm ready to try again. I'm going to find that warp end that has the knot in it and just bring it through the reed, and you can see now my little knot is sitting well onto the web. So I'm just going to take another pin, put it in place and anchor that end back over the pin. Now I can take my warp weight off because it's actually what I've done here is between where my first pin is in place and my second pin is I've actually woven in a false piece. Now I'm going to go back to weaving with the original warp thread that was on the loom in the first place. So this is a really, really important process. We will all have broken warps. At some point in your weaving career, you are going to find a broken warp thread. And to know how to do it, how to fix it so that it's invisible like this and it's 100% stable. These pins are going to stay in place now. A piece comes off the loom, I'll just darn in the ends, and you won't be able to see that there was a problem at all. I'm Glynis from Weave at Brooklands, and I've made a PDF, a download and a print file with photographs and step-by-step instructions on how to complete this whole process. If you would like me to send you that file, please go along to my website. It's www.brooklands.co.za. It's in the links under the banner on my page. Just access the contact form and say, please send me the PDF and leave me your email address, and I will do so with absolute pleasure. The PDF also contains instructions on how to mend a warp float and a weft float. So it's quite a valuable little document for us weavers. And trust me, you will need those instructions. In the meantime, I hope this helped. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.